Hey, I'm RC and this is the episode 19 about creating a multiplayer game in NodeJs. If you haven't watched the last episode, then I would highly recommend you to do so by clicking the annotation on the screen. So in this video, I'm planning to cover how to use items while preventing cheaters. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to change with the code is the way we render the items. So right now we generate a string and then we do a inner HTML equal that string. While it works, it's not really convenient. The onClick, we need to write the onClick as a string. And while it works for this, if the function gets a little bit more tricky, it will become more difficult to do so. So there are two main ways to create, like to change the HTML, like create new elements. The first one is to create a string like we did. The other one is to use something called document create element. And with that, we will be able to create buttons and then do everything but in pure JavaScript, so no string. So how it's gonna work is I'm going to add a new function called addButton. And this function will add a button to the inventory. So the first thing actually here, inventory. So I get that, so I don't need to fetch it all the time, addButton. So like I said, there's this function, create element. You put the name of the element and it's going to create it. So basically it's the equivalent of this over here. So an empty button with nothing inside, pretty much. And then instead of doing onClick equal and then we write a string, we can simply do the button onClick equal a function. And this code, we can just copy, paste it, something like that. And we take this, place it there. Actually, so my plan was to loop through the items and for each item call the addButton with self I, whoops. Okay, something like this. So data over here, data there. So we have added the onClick. Now in order to put the content, we will use the inner HTML trick. Or actually we could use inner text. So items, data amount. And that's pretty much the equivalent of what we had before. So we can remove this, remove that. Move that. The only thing left is to reset the inventory. Yeah, this and actually the button. So we create the button, but we did not specify where to place it. Right now it's just floating in the air. So we need to do inventory append child and then the button. There we go. Okay, so the next thing we need to change is the way the onClick works. Right now we call a function on the client. Don't forget that the rendering is on the client. So right now we click on the item and it calls the event function over here. So we want to change the HP, but it needs to be changed on the server. So it's not actually the client that will use the item. How it's gonna work is that when the player click an item, it sends a package to the server saying, hey, I want to use that item. And then the server will validate, hey, do you really have that item? And if so, you will use the item and do whatever logic we want to be linked with the potion and with the enemy. So in order to do that, we will remove this and instead we will put self socket emit use item with the item ID. Now, if you remember correctly, what we did was that if socket was defined, it was the server, and if socket was not defined, it was the client. It was kind of wacky, and I'm gonna change that. So, because now even if we are on the client, even on the client, we need to be able to access the socket. So, I'm gonna add another parameter that will be called a server. So an inventory is a list of items, the socket, and a boolean saying, hey, am I on the server or am I on the client? And instead of doing this over here, it's gonna be if I'm on the server, do that. Otherwise, do this. I think that's the only part. Yeah. So server, now we need to change the colors. Oops. Over here. Okay, so here we are on the server, so we put true. And over here, we need to put false and the second. Perfect. So the next thing to do is to define what happens when the server receives a use item package. So we send the package, but we don't do anything with it yet. So the logic, we only want it to be on the server. I'm gonna do if cell server. We're gonna listen to the use item package. ID. There we go. Okay, so when we receive a use item package, what we want to do is, very important, verify that the player does have the item. So actually this is self. So we have the function as item. So if the player does not have the item he claims he has, then we will just return. Actually, for now what I'm going to do is I'm going to console log cheater. I want to actually disconnect the player or things like that. Normally you don't want to disconnect the player because sometimes there are desyncs between the server and the client. So you don't want to be too strict on how you treat the players. Let's say that the player clicks super fast. Let's say that the player double click the item, like double click the potion. He sends two packages and one of them will work. It will use the item, but the other one will not work, and then you will like ban the player because he cheated, even though it did not really. So for now we will just console log cheater. It's not really important. So anyway, so if the player does have the item, then what we want to do is to use the item. So exactly like we were doing before. Actually, this will be called item ID. Item ID. We get the item, and yeah, I use list with a capital over there, but I'm gonna change it to a lowercase. So item and then item event, and now normally most of the function we will create over there will like modify the player directly. So it would be handy to like have the player over here that we can play with. So this will work over here. Over there it needs to look something like that. And to access the player, this is how we are going to do it. So we have the player list, it's always valid, and we know that the socket ID is the same than the player ID. So we can simply do something like this. So this is the ID of the player and the socket. Get the player, call event, and that's pretty much it. So the final thing I want to change with the code is this over there. Right now we spawn an enemy. There are no enemies in our multiplayer game, so it's kind of bad. So what I'm going to do is rename it super attack. And what it's gonna do is that it's gonna loop through every degrees, and it's gonna shoot bullets, 360 bullets at the same time. So we know we have access to player over here, so we can do player shoot bullets, and this is the angle. So when the player uses the super attack, it's gonna shoot 360 bullets. It's gonna be epic. And we can choose to remove the item or not. I'm not gonna remove the item. It's just gonna stay there. And after using the potion, for whatever reason, it's gonna give you the super attack, because otherwise there's no way to get it. And finally, to get the initial potion, what I'm going to do is every time you shoot a bullet, this is on the entity, so player shoot bullet, there will be a, I don't know, 10% chance that I'm gonna add the potion item to the player. It makes no sense, but it's gonna be very handy for testing. So I guess we are ready for testing. So reset the server, start the server, localhost 2000, sign in. I have no items. If I keep shooting, I finally get a potion. If I use the potion, I get a super attack. another super. Yeah, there we go. Lots of super attacks. And finally, if I use this, it's gonna shoot 360 bullets. So it's a lot of fun. And finally, one thing I would like to do, actually I'm gonna reset, is to test what happens if a player tries to cheat. So the player opens the console and he says, hey, let's cheat. I'm gonna send a package saying, hey, use item, super attack, send. And if we check on the console, we're gonna see cheater. So the player did not spawn any attack, just nothing happened, and we managed to prevent the cheater. So I guess that will be pretty much it about this video. I hope you liked it, and don't forget to click the annotation on the screen to go check out the next video. See ya!